Hello, ladies and gents. Welcome back to Dennis Saliba Occult Forteana. And in today's video, I'm going to be covering the death and funerary practices of Laos and talk about the traditions related to their hosting of funerals and burying the dead. Having said that, let's get into today's articles. There's a handful of articles today. Let's get into them and see what's involved. So Laos or Lao dead ceremony and funeral ceremony in Laos is largely conducted in accordance with Buddhist customs. Following the death of natural causes, the body is kept at the home of the deceased for 1 to 3 days, during which time villagers come to pay their respects and assist the family of the deceased in what is a sort of long, continuous, low-key wake. The body is usually cremated, but in some cases it is buried. So how is Lao dead ceremony held? The procession starts with the coffin of the deceased arriving at the ceremony site, led by Buddhist monks. White-robed nuns follow the monks together, and they walk in a line, hold a ceremonial white cloth. Family members walk behind the nuns, while the funeral car holding the deceased coffin and friends of the deceased follow closely behind. The coffin is covered by a funeral tower, which was then taken apart upon arrival. So as you can see here, the monks, they are preceding the family, and then the family members of the deceased precede the friends and the family. Then the coffin is carried to the raised grave site or pier. Monks and family members circle the site with the coffin several times before the coffin is laid on top of the raised grave site or pier. Monks and family members are dripping juice or fresh coconut into the coffin. A picture of the deceased is placed on the mam, flowers and donations surrounding it. On 3 sides of the mam, family members and dignitaries, the monks and nuns, and the general public are seated. The funeral is ready to begin. The white ceremonial cloth that nuns were holding during the procession is tied to one of the corners of the mam. It is then placed in front of the female family members and nuns, who sit adjacent to the mum. Family members then offer candles and flowers to the deceased. The ceremony ends with the lighting of the pyre by family female members. They also throw candies at children. When the mam is burning, it becomes clear that a lot of firewood is stacked beneath the mam to make sure the body is burned. Only a few monks remain to collect the ashes later on. Looking at a wooden door of the temple, it becomes clear that these funeral rites are deeply rooted in Buddhism. Like so, that's the tower of the deceased. That looks like to be the nuns, the monks, and the family members. People who come to the funeral normally offer some money, some rice with top, tian, and flowers to show respect to the dead. After the funeral is over, this money and stuff belong to relatives, parents of the deceased person. Relatives and friends of the deceased person will be attended by a monk or nun on a day of cremation. After the cremation, it is time to collect the bones in the cemetery and put them into an urn and move them to a small stupa in the temple. The family of the dead must invite monks to pray in order to invite the soul of the dead person to the urn in the stupa, which is essentially the same as a gravestone. I'm guessing that's also referred to as the stupa. Traditions and taboos in Lao funeral ceremony. During the funeral, do not kill any animals. Foods you can't bring in there. Don't play loud music, dance, or sing. It means that it's not a kind of music entertainment during the funeral. However, after the cremation, you can do that. I'm presuming after the cremation is when the wake technically begins. If death is sudden or an accidental death, the body can't be in the house. In a Buddhist funeral, the body will be kept in the temple and must be buried as soon as possible. Traditionally, the people who come to the funeral will stay overnight to keep the cousin of death person company. They can play with cards, watch videos, and chill at the night, or chill in the night. It's a very interesting tradition, that one. The taboos in Lao dead ceremony. Don't take food at the Huandi. The Lao consider that the deceased has moved on and beyond, and in a sense relieved of their life sin that they have repaid in their current lifetime. You can't cook noodle dishes because the noodle is considered as strings that may bind the deceased soul to their former life and the things they left behind. Wash your hands with blessed water before the funeral home. Pretty interesting rules, those, quite interesting. Let's have a look at some more articles and see what they say. Lao ritual of death in Western urban in memory of Lang Luangpot, published on the 14th of September 2018 by Laos Monamor. Rest in peace, Mrs. Lang Luangpot. I don't personally know you, I don't, but rest in peace. Her 19 grandchildren and 14 great-grandchildren and her large family all over the world. I'm not reading into her biography. I want to read the significance of the death through the eulogy. I'm going to skip forward to the eulogy because I feel like it's not my place to read the biography. I don't know the person. I think it's rude if I'm trying to read the person's biography. So I'm just going to skip ahead and read elements of the nature of the funeral itself. The dead has gone but doesn't disappear, wrote John C. Holtz, referring to Buddhists in Sri Lanka. Patrice Ludwig and Paul Williams share this opinion. At death, a configuration disappears to give room for another structure. The dead could be all around us, but they are no longer ours. A society is not only composed of the living, but also the dead, said Daniel de Copper. According to Michael Henry Dufour, the death, which seems so definitive, is nothing but an interruption, or rather a reorientation of current incessant life. The funeral does not constitute a permanent separation from the deceased with this family, despite symbolic acts of separation. Similarly, a Chinese marriage symbolizes the separation of a woman from her birthplace, but this separation is only one step in the cycle. And for Yojiro Takita, death is a kind of entrance. To die does not mean that we have arrived at the end. Death is just a door with a guardian to a long way, but the travelers will return by this entrance, explained by a Japanese director in his film Departures, or Okuribito in Japanese. Convinced the deceased remains in the heart and in the love of his loved ones in a very concrete way, Lao Buddhists overseas have a rather detached and respectful behavior to death, even if sadness and sorrow are immeasurable, as in all other cultures, but they live in a restrained, discreet way. Everything resides in the unsaid, in the gestures, and expresses itself especially by the solidarity and the mutual community aid. No crying or pains. One verse of the Dharma scriptures specifies that no crying, no sorrow, or any kind of mourning is profitable to the deceased, whose parents, however, remain grieved. Unlike the ritual surrounding a death in Laos, where everything takes place at the deceased's home in the West, everything happens at the hospital, with a few exceptions of some countries, but Lao nationals always try to respect and reproduce the same rites because they are aware that the soul of the dead called Venana in Pali, or in Lao, consciousness, because that's Pali, must find peace to allow him to live peacefully in harmony with his family and his environment, and in harmony with himself. As soon as a death is confirmed, the sick room is transformed into a mortuary chamber with a sheet hung across the floor as a distinctive sign of change. The sweeping family gathered around the bed, and monks, at least 3, are invited to give their first blessings by reciting the prayer of the dead, the Matika, in order to transfer the Buddhist precepts of Sentam to the deceased, and the Anika Vatar Sakahara. I don't know what that means. It's my first time seeing those language terms and concepts. It's also in French as well. In some US states, California and Portland, for instance, the first ritual may take place at home. When the end of life has occurred there for various reasons, the corpse will then be taken to the funeral home while waiting for the official funerals. On this occasion, close members of the family would ask for pardon from the dead with 2 objectives: to obtain the reign of harmony in both worlds, the living and the dead, the visible and the invisible spiritual realm. I will add that that could possibly include the astral realm as well, in order to allow the dead to follow his own new path without having to worry about the fate of the living. To forgive each other operates an effective purification, noted Marcel Zago, because it avoids feelings of guilt, said Sonemani Nigole, before adding, it allows to settle one's accounts so that the dead can live in peace and would have no reason to come back and annoy the living. In Lao cosmology, forgiveness is of great importance because of our belief in the existence of Bun, merit, beneficence, and Bob, sin or tear, because of our perpetual search of the famous harmony, the prerequisite for obtaining happiness here and in the afterlife. That's why we organize the ceremony of forgiveness at Pime Lao, at a wedding, or even the precepts days or Vansi. That is to say that the 15 days of the increasing and the decreasing moon, so the ascending and the descending cycle. In the West, Lao nationals also practice this ritual on Mother's Day or on the parents' birthdays. Territorial continuum. As in Lao, the family gets help from an officiant who masters in religious customs and prayers in Pali. It also precedes the symbolic mortuary bath, I'm guessing this is the bath here, by sprinkling perfume or eau de cologne, I think that's eau de cologne, on the body of the deceased. This ritual can be quite painful and charged with strong emotions, even with crying and violent sobs, since it is the very first time close relatives find their loved one without a vital breath. Sometimes they were talking about things, and others even making plenty of plans for the future just in the evening of the day before. In addition, the small size of the room doesn't allow them to sit down in accordance with Buddhist canons, as in their native country, to pay a dignified and compassionate tribute to their dear departed. Often, parents are forced to stand around the end of the bed with their hands clapped like this, as a sign of respect and homage. Like that. I've seen them do this sometimes in some of the videos. I think that's to do with the opening of the heart, but then they do that to show their respect. I've seen that movement before. The huge pain linked with the loss of a loved one is then multiplied by nostalgia and the obligation to entrust him or her to his or her home very far away from from his or her native land without any material link with his or her ancestors who were buried in the homeland. This raises the question of territorial continuity, on the basis of which the Vada Buddhists, either they are Khmer, Thai, Burma, Sri Lanka, and Laos, of course, pass on the merits of to their deceased parents through the monks of Mai Torani or Mai Torani. They spell it differently to Thai. Thai, it's M-A-E, but I'm guessing that's transcribed more to French. Mai Torani, the earth goddess, thanks to the pouring of lustral water to the ground and the famous Yadnam, which is the center of all transfers of gifts and born to the deceased. Buddha used to say that every piece of land, wherever it may be, may well have harbored our bones in previous lives, or had been a site of a sima. That is, or this is why we must always ask for prior permission from protective genius before undertaking any work, said the head of the Venerable Vat Bussy de Saint-Georges, east of Paris, to provide Vat Bussy Saint-Georges, east of Paris, to provide an indirect answer to this nascent fear. The vulnerable implied in particular that the higher beings of the Vanana, of the dead, can travel freely through the universe without any spatial or material hindrance. But then why a great-granddaughter in Vientiane had been inhabited by the spirit of a grandfather who died a long time ago, and told the family that his wife, also deceased and gone to France to accompany his daughter-in-law, could not go back home alone, and that his son had to take her back to Laos by making a trip to their homeland. Perfume and eau de cologne. I don't speak French. That's my best French that I can pronounce. Perfume, or perfume, and eau de cologne. In any case, the ritual of the mortuary bath is much less structured and elaborated than that practiced in Laos. Just a little bit of perfume sprinkled on the body without the breath of life of the loved one. In the 1960s to the 1970s, Lao people used sandalwood water in Pakek, in the Sompai in Lao, or Acacia concina water in Busuk, according to Shal and Chalmeblut. In the other areas of Laos, lukewarm water and then cold water were used for mortuary bath to symbolize the necessary duality of things and beings. It is one of the laws of nature that the simultaneous existence of opposites, cold and heat, happiness and grief, the best and the worst, birth and death, and so on, is just Pierre Somjin Ning. This dichotomy can also have ordinary water impurity and coconut juice purity, which are poured on the deceased's face just before cremation. Besides, it's one of many differences with practice in Laos. Family is not allowed to wear the dead for his last trip on earth. In France and Paris, for instance, living parents have to choose his or her favorite clothes and give them the mortuary room service that realize a rather good job in general. The family has naturally had to give advisors or preferences to the desired final appearance of their loved one. So there are no longer double clothes as in Laos, the one upside down, that of the dead one, and the other normally that of the living one. This duality is the symbol of the infinite succession of birth and death, said P.S. Ning. Charles Chelibut noted that one has to tear the skirt and the jacket. One of the buttons of the jacket has to be torn off. R.G. Woodthorpe, 1882, has also seen similar practice by the Hattigoria in India, who made holes in the clothes of the dead in order to make them useless for anyone who might be tempted to steal them. No silver or gold coin. Lao nationals living in the West do give his or her favorite belongings to the deceased: handbags, shoes, scarves, and so on, as well as the bang in Lao, cones made of banana leaves or paper containing money, flowers, and a pair of candles. But we carefully avoid to put in the coffin of metallic objects such as mobile phones, knives, and so on. It's the customs in Laos for security reasons. For the same reason, jewels, a gold or a silver coin, are not put in the mouth or on the corpse of the deceased. Two main reasons preside over these changes. On the one hand, the death is incinerated in high temperature ovens. Silver or gold jewels would have been completely melted, so there is no use putting them in the coffin, since their main purpose is to be given to a living member of the family by the death. In Laos, the chosen relative would find the jewels during the collect of the bones. On the other hand, ashes are collected by employees of the funeral home, who put them in an urn before giving them to the family. Therefore, the dead has only money from the bang, which is the banana leaf bundles, and the yodmuk's content sent to him or her through donations to the monks to pay for the passage or buy flowers, candles, and incense sticks in order to pay tribute to the Kop Chai Lai Stupa. Kop Chai sorry, I thought that was a French word, guys. Kop Chai Stupa, which is believed to be on the 7th floor of the paradise, according to Okin Somhor Faktu, a scholar of Lao culture and civilization. I'm going to have to search him up. Still, the real function of these gold or silver coins is rather problematic, and specialists have sometimes contradictory opinion. A vaticum, to live with the fi or the nin, a means to pay for the cross of the river that separates the world of the living from the world of the deaths, means to pay the guardian of the gates of the afterlife. Old Zargol sees a way to derive attachment to material goods. Mahokala, quoted by François Lagirade, also speaks of paradoxical act executed by mockery. That's the same idea underlined by Robert Halliday and Kyodun when they mention the point of irony, a malicious and sarcastic act that emphasized the uselessness of wealth. This is a very, very, very detailed article, this one. This is incredibly detailed. This half the stream is going to be this article. Read that. Read about the bung. Then another question is raised. Will those who have passed away in the West, very far from their ancestral lands, be condemned to wander eternally between the two worlds without gold or silver coins in his or her mouth? No monk or close relatives of the deceased have ever raised this thornbury problem in France or in the USA, assuming that the souls of those who have died in the West have always reached their final destination, namely to be at peace and in harmony with themselves, with their families, and with their near and far environment. It is permissible to discuss the relevance of this practice in Theravada Buddhist countries. Another great difference in the ritual of death in Western urban settings compared to practice in Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, or other Theravada countries is the funeral sigil organized at the former home of the deceased without his body, kept in the cold room of the hospital where he has ended his existence on earth. but several families recognize that this absence does not hinder the smooth running of the whole ritual. Even some see benefits. They underline specifically the small size of apartments or even houses, an unfavorable environment where Lao nationals are often living alone and isolated in their neighborhood among the French or Americans. And finally, the absence of the coffin at Hunedi is as scary for people with sensitive souls and for those who believe in spirits and fee or ghosts. Nevertheless, the spirits of the dead, a higher being, is still able to go freely where they want, to take care of a relative or to play with the nerves of others. One night in April 2017, a monk who was driving his delegation back on their residence from a Hunaadi was quite surprised to hear the GPS tell him to turn right when he should go left and vice versa, because grandma didn't want to see the master who she loves and respects since the first steps in Buddhism some 60 years ago in Laos to leave soon that evening. So after the death of a loved one, the close members of the family gather at the deceased's former home, prepare everything so that all the elements of a traditional funeral vigil are in place for the prayers of the Nika Vata Sankara and the big kusada of the evening, just like the logistics to accommodate in Lao style with food and drink at any time, family, relatives, friends, neighbors, and so on. A special care has to be given to the transport of venerable for the next 3 nights. Thus, a specialist Buddhist floral art will take care of the preparation of hanha or hanped, or makbang, or yodmuk, the essential element of Buddhist ritual, as well as photos of the deceased. A candle is lit permanently, as in Lao lands, to show the way to the spirits of the dead, so they come to receive the gifts and the boon transmitted to him by the family. In the US, and for technical reasons, waiting for close members of the family to arrive from Laos, Thailand, or elsewhere, the 3 nights vigil or virgil may be organized later, for example, 3 days before the cremations. A close relative must stay all the time in front of the altar, where a large statuette of Buddha has also been installed to welcome visitors to receive their gift and to thank them with health, success, and happiness wishes. Unlike the practice in Laos, where a gift for a dead person is made of silver, flowers, and candles, and raw rice, in the West, it is limited to an envelope with money. The hosts usually provide a han or a kan. I think it's a kan. I don't speak Lao, but I'm learning. And flowers to the visitors' donors. This trend has also been noted in Lao urban areas, especially in Vientiane and the capital, Nigole. Donations, solidarity sharing. Oil, Mum or for Oil, Mr. or Mrs. is here today to pay tribute to you with a donation and respect. Please accept them and give him or her your protection and blessings. Would shout to the altar the person responsible for the welcome of relatives, friends, and neighbors. At the same time, donors and mourners raise the kan in front of their head as a sign of respect and deep consideration while uttering to the deceased their wishes for a smooth existence full of peace, where there are only harmony and the absolute cessation of everything in the ultimate destination. That's to say, the real happiness, heavens, or nirvana. In Laos, would throw a handful of rice toward the coffin, a bit like Thailand and Burma, to inform the dead of the donation. The absence of rice in donation in the West deprives an essential dimension to the obligatory reunion of the Lao community, especially in such painful circumstances. Sonemene Negole, and thus underline the great importance of putting together rice donated to the Huanedi. Rice brought by each person is mixed and cooked together, which implies that everyone eats the rice from the community. It's a community bonding event. This strong symbolism helps to strengthen the bonds of the community that is going through a difficult ordeal, albeit together. And each and everybody can feel responsible for and a part of the smooth running or not of the event. This pulling of a community of rice takes place at the parties organized to mark the different stages of life in Laos according to the Buddhist calendar. Villagers could also donate bananas, coconuts, sweet potatoes, or banana leaves, which are very useful in making bungs and mukbangs. Each time I go back to my home or home village, synonym of a party and or basi. I consume with sweet pleasure this rice composed of dissimilar grains of multiple colors, but which, like the legendary solidarity of our little people, stick together perfectly together to form one and only social unit, like all those villagers who do not hide their joy at seeing me again, so delighted and happy to share with us the sticky rice that does not exist anywhere outside these special circumstances of communion and sharing. It's an extraordinary condensed our culture and our philosophy of sharing and solidarity in a single bite of sticky rice. The grains of glutinous rice put in a dish will stay together independently without any interaction, without any cooperation, and without any mutual help between them. Every grain rubs shoulders with the other without ever going into fusion. On the contrary, as soon as it is cooked, sticky rice becomes unity, one and only and unique, and represents beauty and calms hunger and gives satisfaction to those who consume it, said the Thai Venerable Thea Zhong of Tournon Center of France. When we come together to practice meditation and pay tribute to the triple jewel, we become one and forceful unity like sticky rice once cooked. Even when we are separated, we will remain united by Dharma like a sticky rice ball, the Venerable said, thus adding a spiritual dimension to this staple of a large part of the world's population. And what a beautiful illustration of Buddha's thought on the gift that what is primordial in a donation is neither its content nor its quality, but the noble intention of its author. The visitor of the day then joins family members to discuss, prepare floral arrangements or for funerals, for food and cakes in the tapad. In the next morning, he will either share the lunch or dinner with everyone in the community. The good house, Huanedi, open permanently to the outside world, and the community is always full of people. Either they are members of the family or mourners until the day after the funeral, the first celebration in memory of the deceased, called Lao Bon Chakao. Bursts of laughter and songs or lam can be heard during these evenings, and they are, with no doubt, the perfect illustrations of a certain detachment of Lao nationals in relation to death. Some even say that it is the deceased who dictates the general atmosphere by himself. If he or she has left in peace and harmony with his family, he or she will make joy and concord. Fraternity and love will prevail in the household, especially for the Lao Buddhists. The deceased is always at his former home with his relatives, mingling in with everyone's business, teasing, hiding some items, for example, or helping others. The only difference is that we do not see him or her anymore in the flesh. I still feel her presence, said with a very dear friend from Lily, as soon as he was at our home to pay tribute along with his wife to a lady who he has known since the very first years as a reporter in Strasbourg with the east of France. He especially appreciated the Asian dishes cooked with love and taste by my mother-in-law, and in the first place, sticky rice with coconut and milk and durian, and of course, famous lap, or Laotian steak tatar. That sounds really good. Lap. 3 daily meals, the most palpable and the most materialistic illustration of the actual presence of a deceased at his or her former home is the setting up of 3 daily meals in front of the altar and his or her photo with the same dishes as those consumed by the living, in addition to his or her favorite food or drink. I remember very much the emotion, the morning ritual provided by a niece from Laos for the whole of the funeral to watch. She was going to buy croissants and chocolate bread for her grandmother in the same bakery, exactly as she did the week of her convalescence at home. R.I.P. So that's the 3 meals there. And the silver chalices. I might break this up into 2 parts because this is much longer than I thought it would be. I'll read up to the salary part. 2 explanations can be given concerning this ritual of meals, which is provided by the Lao nationals wherever they are living. First of all, their intimate conviction that a recent death before his funeral at the Chakal still has all his energy and all the rights to live at home, his home, as well as that of drinking and eating, as when he was still alive. During this period, it is also possible to contact directly the deceased without the intermediary of monks because of a stronger vital energy than that during his lifetime. Secondly, the Lao are convinced that all good deeds, and in particular the offering of food, are the mother of the gifts, insofar they contribute to the preserving and developing of the most precious thing of the living world, the life, the vital breath. And they also do know and strongly believe that they receive in return boon or merits either for the time being or in the next existence, whether as a human being or in the nirvana. In the evening, monks and family gather for prayer or Nika Vata Sankhara to pay tribute to and to transfer merits to the deceased, even if the deep essence of prayer is to call to the living for what they do not lament in their fate and their attachments regarding the ephemeral body, in particular to become one with the impermanence where pure wisdom resides. Can there be joy and laughter when the world is consumed so quickly? Should not you, the contrary, seek the light of the wisdom before darkness falls? A passage of the prayer especially challenges the living before adding bodies. This body we rely on glorio, an impermanent and unstable mass which declines with diseases. Fragile, it disintegrates over the years to lead to death, an inescapable course. However, it should be noted that a few people understand Pali apart from ancient monks. These chants, therefore, mostly experienced by family and friends of the deceased as a way to get in touch, to keep in touch with him or her, since all listen to the sacred words without understanding their deep meaning, sitting cross-legged, clasped hands as a sign of respect and meditation. But all these Samadis feel in a real and important social function from the sociological and ethnological point of view. They punctuate the vigil, remind the living of their inevitable fate, which is death, put in communion the whole community of destiny, reassure some and comfort others. As in Laos, the family provides all that is necessary for monks, such as drinks, cigarettes, and of course bang, a code made of paper or banana leaf containing a pair of candles, flowers, and money. Researchers and some Orientalists have discussed The purpose of these Vong essential elements in any Buddhist ritual, including assimilating them to a salary given to monks in exchange for a service and declaiming prayers. I'll stop that article there because I want to read that in two halves because that's a very, very detailed article. I have one more, which is about the traditional Hmong family. It's about half a page, about a page. It's about another very, very specific funeral. All right, so this is from the Selected Independent Funeral Homes. Funeral homes give obviously very good details on funerary and burial practices. A traditional Hmong family from Laos. Tor Vang was 76 when he died after a long illness and several hospitalizations. However, in keeping with his wishes and with the help of his family and hospice, Tor was able to live in his own home until he died, surrounded by many members of his clan who lived nearby. A member of the Hmong community, Tor and his wife, Sua, immigrated from Laos in the late 1960s. The Hmong are an ethnic group from the highland regions of Southeast Asia, especially Laos, Cambodia, and China. Hundreds of thousands of Hmong immigrated to North America in the 1960s and 1970s as the political climate of Southeast Asia became more volatile. Historically, a nomadic people, Hmong are animists, believing individual spirits to inhabit things in the world. There are household spirits, spirits in natural things such as rocks and trees, and ancestral spirits as part of the belief system. Roxanne, Tor's hospice nurse, saw Tor lying on a grass mat on the living room floor when she arrived at the home on Wednesday morning, about 20 minutes after his death, a practice she knew to be common among Hmong in her community. Some of the Hmong families Roxanne had previously helped had been willing to discuss funerary plans in advance, but Tor's family adhered to strict Hmong custom and declined to discuss what would happen when he died. For all of the first day, Tor's body lay in the house, even though his sons made contact with the funeral director, commonly called by other members of their community. Tor's sons and nephews bathed him under the direction of a community leader, while many family members and friends wailed loudly in the next room. As soon as a wooden stretcher was constructed, Tor transferred to it. Within an hour of Mr. Vang's death, two community musicians arrived to play the funeral drum and the queech, a traditional Hmong reed pipe instrument. While in some communities gunshots would have been fired to announce the death in deference to local news, the playing of this reed pipe and beating of a funeral drum had become the public announcement of death. Though in Laos, Hmong families would have kept their loved one at home throughout the funeral period. The custom in Tor's community was to keep the deceased at home a day or two and then phone the funeral director to take charge. Early Thursday afternoon, 28 hours after his death, the funeral home became the scene for the family and community members' activities related to Tor Vang's funeral as the funeral directors arrived and took Mr. Vang into their care. Several cars followed in procession as the funeral vehicle left Vang's home and made it his slow journey about 3 miles to the funeral home. Tor's sons and nephews took him from the hearse and carried him directly into the funeral chapel where his stretcher would rest on the floor. Many Hmong families would decline embalming, but in this Hmong community, embalming was routinely chosen to allow them to most effectively carry out the funeral customs. Over the next routinely chosen many and carried him directly to the funeral chapel where his stretcher would rest on the floor. Many Hmong families would decline embalming, but in this Hmong community, embalming was routinely chosen to allow them to effectively carry out their funeral customs. Over the next several days, people came and went from the funeral home, which remained available to family and community around the clock. The food was cooked under a tent in the parking lot, and quij and drum played continuously. In funeral communities of North America and Europe, Hmong funeral activities typically include a mixture of rituals at the funeral home and in the family home. With help of community elders, Monday was selected as the auspicious day for the burial, although a Hmong burial might not occur for 10 or 12 days after the death. Family members and friends sat up with Tor's body all night on Sunday, while an elder sang sacred texts to both Tor and his family. With the help of the funeral director, Tor's sons transferred his body to the casket they had selected, simply made of wood with no screws or other metal hardware. In keeping with traditional Hmong customs, Tor's burial held in the afternoon, since common belief is that the first two major spirits leave the body at sunset. That's interesting. More than 35 volunteer helpers were involved in the funeral for Tor Vang, performing a multitude of vital tasks. Different chefs prepared vegetables, rice, and different kinds of meat. A light supplier assured adequate candles were available and that they continued burning, with city utilities available for cooking and washing, with the traditional roles of water carriers and firewood gatherers were symbolic, even though when Mr. Vang's own father died in Laos, an ox was butchered the morning of the ritual for Tor Vang's funeral. Meat was obtained from a local Hmong market. This meat was then used for the feast to be shared by family and friends when they returned to the family home from the cemetery. The Vang's clothing store remained closed during the funeral period, not opening again until Wednesday, opening Tor's burial, but Tor's burial by no means entered his community's funeral rites, because, like many Hmong, Tor's belief was that the second major soul does not leave the body until at least 13 days after burial. In keeping with his family belief, a second ceremony was held 2 weeks after Tor's burial, in which the quij player and drummer, along with many other community members, reassembled to help Tor's second major soul return to the world of ancestors. His soul releasing ceremony is necessary in common Hmong belief so that the deceased can be reassigned to Earth. While the Vang family represents one way Hmong families and communities acknowledge death and pay tribute to the life of their loved ones, it is by no means the only way. The following resources will be helpful to you as you continue to learn about these customs. I'm going to save these in my Discord. Hmong death customs, traditional and acculturated in DP Irish, ethnic variations in dying, death, and grief. The spirit catches you when you fall down, Hmong child, and her American doctors. Hmong instructions to the dead. That would be very interesting. The late homecomer, Hmong family in memoir, and culture and knowledge of the sacred quij in the Hmong American community studies. Very interesting. I'm going to save those references for later. I need to research this more. I'm going to read that second part of that article next time, because that's a very, very long article. Not that one, the previous one that I was reading. Very, very, very long article. Something I was not expecting to be that long. I'm going to save that there. But let me know, guys, if you have any questions or comments. This is definitely my first time reacting to this type these customs and practices of Laos. Definitely new for me. Humanis Invictus, the human spirit remains unconquered, and Kop Chai Lai Lai, which means thank you very much for your viewership and your listening. Bye for now, and take care.